Recently, the government of India had released the National Education Policy 2020. The main thing they have done in that education policy is they have allocated 6% of GDP, which is the highest in the history of government of India for education sector, which is a welcome move. But then there are a lot of aspects to the policies that go with that. Mark, over to you.
Thank you so much, Kenan. Let me begin by saying that I love India. You're so wonderfully culturally diverse. You are the largest democracy in the world. I think that you are poised to do very well if you do the right things in the coming years. I don't know all that much about India. I've only been there once. I was only in New Delhi and Hyderabad, but I do know about a lot of things related to education. And I do know a fair amount about Indian kids because I have met them through Kiran Sethi's Design for Change organization. And I'm very proud of them. I'm here to talk about education and maybe make a few comments on the national education policy. Many of you may know a very famous quote from Nelson Mandela. Education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. A lot of people use that in their talks. I want to tell you that that was true in the 20th century, but it is no longer true in the 21st century. And this is a huge issue. What's true in the 21st century, where all our kids are going to live, is that the greatest weapons, the most powerful weapons we can use to change the world are empowerment and accomplishment. Empowerment and accomplishment. And that is really the crux of what I think needs to happen in India, in Tamil Nadu, and in fact, the whole world. And since we mentioned Nelson Mandela, let's mention an even more powerful freedom fighter, Gandhi. And Gandhi said, true education must correspond to the surrounding circumstances. And he's absolutely right. So we need to look at what those surrounding circumstances are now and in the future. We're at a very big turning point, which I will illustrate at the very end with a slide. We are at a turning point just around the turn of the millennium, and 2000 will be remembered for all of history because so many things happened that were important. I think there are three we should focus on. The first is, of course, technology. And we all know that technology is changing rapidly, that right around the turn of the millennium was the time when the internet started to reach billions of people. It's not coming everywhere equally, we all know that, but it is coming fast. The Starlink satellite network that Elon Musk is putting up is already up, and my sense is that if we don't think about tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, but we think about 20 years from now, which is when the kids of today will be living their lives in the mid to late 21st century, all of them will likely have what we have today. Some will have more, but all of them will be connected at high speeds with some device that will help them, I think. That's technology, but that's not the only thing. And in fact, it's not enough. Because the other thing that is changing incredibly rapidly in our times is beliefs, is what we think. And beliefs are changing, mostly generationally, from generation to generation in huge numbers of areas. And the reason they're changing is because those people who grew up in the 20th century, which is almost all of us, anybody who's over 20 today grew up in the 20th century, those people are what I call the last pre-internet generation the world will ever know. That's us. The kids, of course, are the first internet generation the world has ever had, and all the other generations following them will be connected as well. So certainly one of the great infrastructure things that India and Tamil Nadu ought to do is connect everybody, make sure that everybody's connected. For me, that's priority number one. But how are beliefs changing? Well, beliefs are changing in terms of whether kids are powerful or not. In the 20th century, kids were not powerful. In the 21st century, they are. So they need to change their beliefs to say, I can. And the beliefs are changing not just with regard to that, but with regard to technology and privacy and property and personal relationships and sexuality and security and power and kids and work and empathy and violence and God and religion and justice and money and love and government and even time and space. And this is not just me thinking this, this is anthropologists and sociologists thinking this as well. So the first internet generations are going to have different sets of beliefs. One of the great beliefs of the last pre-internet generation, that's us, is that education is the most important thing that we can do, because it was for us. And we all went through it and we all benefited from it, and it was terrific. And almost all of us want to pass it down to our kids, more or less the same way we got it, only better. And that has unfortunately changed, because what we need to pass down to our kids is not the 20th century education that we received, but a new way of thinking based on empowerment and accomplishment. Let me talk about education for a little bit. It's long, so I read it quickly, the National Education Policy. And it's good. And you have hundreds of millions of kids in India, and it's going to be a younger population. So you have something big that has to be dealt with. And I can understand that it's very complex and the policy runs more than 60 pages. It's full of the right buzzwords. In fact, if you look at page 1 alone, you will see 30 buzzwords, from achieving full human potential, to building character, to being ethical and rational, to being discovery-oriented and learner-oriented. I could read them all, but you can see them all on page 1. And that's very nice. I admire that. But the entire policy, if you look at the whole thing, is really what I call icing to 20th century education. And when I say icing, that's an acronym: incremental changes. Incremental changes to 20th century education. We're going to move from a 10 and 2 system to a 5-3-3-4 system. We're going to do a whole lot of these incremental changes, and they're probably not bad in and of themselves, but they miss the key point in my view. And this is really what I want to bring to your attention. If you look for the word empowerment in that document, I saw it once, and it was not even in the same sense that I'm talking about. If you look for the word accomplishment, I don't think you'll find it at all in that document. So the two key things that are needed for the 21st century by all our kids, empowerment and accomplishment, are not in the national education policy. And therefore, it's really important that we start thinking about how to get some of that in. And maybe we can do it nationally, and maybe we can do it on a state basis, because you have a state. Now, here's something that's really interesting. When I got to page 60, way deep in the national education policy, suddenly there was a little section called 25.2, which you can look up. It's one sentence. And it says, we recommend that we redesignate the Ministry of Human Resource Development, which is what takes care of education at the national level today. We say you should redesignate that the Ministry of Education. Okay, buried deep, but it's there. That to me is really going backwards. I agree that you should redesignate the ministry. I think it should become the Ministry of Empowerment and Accomplishment. The Ministry of Empowerment and Accomplishment, ENA, if you will. That should be for the nation, and if the state, like Tamil Nadu, has a Department of Education, rename that the Department of Empowerment and Accomplishment. Why would you do that? Because then that's what you would focus on. That's what your job would be if you work for that department or that ministry. You would be to empower the youth and the people of India and to help them accomplish. And when I say accomplish, what I mean is projects that will make India better. So I could see, and I've recommended in one of my books, taking an entire year to say, we're not going to teach the old curriculum this year. What we're going to do is every kid in India, every kid in Tamil Nadu will do a project that makes some aspect of India better. And those projects will be chosen by the kids, not by the teachers or by anybody else, based on what the kids see as problems that they would like to fix. So some kids may do some projects that clean up places. Other kids may do projects that get rid of racism or corruption or other kinds of things. Some kids may put beggars to work, as I saw one project happening. I will share with you my favorite project from India, which is that a team put together and built a sandal that women can wear. And this sandal has a little device in it that can capture the energy when the woman walks around, so that it stores the energy in the sandal. And what it can do is, if by chance that woman gets accosted or attacked, she can just, with her toe, push a button and set off a really loud alarm. So that was invented by kids. And there are many, many, many more projects like that throughout India. I saw some of them when I was in New Delhi at the Festival of Innovation. What I saw was that some of these great projects were there. They'd been invented, but they hadn't been disseminated. And that, in a country of your size, is a very important piece of the puzzle, that you not only have to invent these things and create these things, but they have to be able to reach the people. I am going to now show you a couple of slides to end up here. They resume what I've said. I am really talking here about vision and hope. I have a vision that I'm sharing with you, and I really hope that you take advantage of it. You have this enormous opportunity. The first one is what I said before. Nelson Mandela's famous statement that education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world was true in the 20th century, and it's no longer true in the 21st century. In the 21st century, empowerment and accomplishment are the most powerful weapons you can use to change the world. And the corollary of this is the SDG number 4, which a lot of people cite as well, and certainly cited in the report, that everybody should have equitable access to high quality education and lifelong learning really should be amended to say that people should have access to lifelong empowerment and lifelong to equitable empowerment and to lifelong accomplishment. What we have in 2020 is an enormous choice to make. We have to decide whether we are going to move backward to the past or whether we are going to move forward to the future. This is a very stark choice. The last pre-internet generation, almost all of our adults born and raised and who had their beliefs formed in the 20th century, want to go back to a 20th century education with incremental changes, icing, which means we keep the schools, we keep the courses, we keep the classes, and we keep thinking of our kids as powerless learners who have to spend years in school before they can accomplish anything. That is really, I think, what the national education policy is and does, despite all the buzzwords. The other alternative, and the one that I certainly recommend for Tamil Nadu and for the entire country and for the entire world, is to move our kids forward to the future. They are the first internet generation the world will ever know, and every generation that comes after them will have a more powerful internet. They need empowerment and accomplishment. They need not schools, but empowerment hubs or whatever we call them. They need not courses and classes, but projects with real world impact, with measurable positive impact on the world. And they need to think of themselves, and we need to think of them, not as powerless learners, but as imaginers and doers and dreamers. And if we do that, we will be so much better off. If you want to talk about this more, I offer my email. I'm happy to engage with anybody in the world who wants to learn more about these ideas. The choices are clear. The choices are, do we want to go backwards or do we want to go forwards with our kids? And we can make those choices, and people around the world are starting to define what that is, what those choices mean, how we can do this. The kids are, wherever we do this, like in Design for Change or other places in the world, are very, very enthusiastic about doing this. I think we can improve the infrastructure, which is really job number one. And then I think that we can redesignate the ministry or the department as the Department of Empowerment and Accomplishment, and we can go very far. And I really hope we can get to where the kids need to be. I offer my help in any way I can. Thank you very much.
Empowerment and accomplishment. I think that's the keywords I have learned today, and how to put it to practice. I think these thoughts are very, very useful and very timely.